Hello and welcome to Friday Live. I am your host, Strata lawyer Amanda Farmer. We're heading out live to the Your Strata Property Facebook page. We're going out to LinkedIn. We are also heading out to YouTube. It is Friday. It has been another big week in Strata for everyone. It is so good to be here. I missed you all last week. It was our Easter long weekend. We didn't have a Friday chat last Friday, and I noticed it. It felt a little bit weird. Felt like it was a Saturday. Should have been a Friday. I felt like Thursday. I should have been here chatting to you all. Didn't happen. But I'm here now this week. I hope you all had a lovely, restful, long weekend, that you did some nice things with family, with friends, with nobody, just relaxing in your own space. We did absolutely nothing, as was the plan. I've had lots of busy weeks traveling. We've had guests the last few weekends, and I was determined that last week, the long weekend, there would be nothing planned. And that is exactly what happened. And I had a very restful weekend indeed. So I hope you were able to do the same. Now, I have sat down after, again, busy day doing some client work, running around at school holidays here at the moment. So doing a bit of that as well. And I've just sat down and I've looked in the camera at my T-shirt here, which is all crinkled and unironed. And I said to Rochelle and Mina, who are supporting me, oh, here I am, unironed, looking a little bit wrinkly. I don't iron. And I'd be interested to know what you, dear audience, think about ironing. I don't iron. I don't have the time for it. And you may have noticed that in some of our live chats as I turn up here in my wrinkled clothing. But I know you don't mind. Not here to see that. Here to hear about strata law issues and what we've all been up to this week in Strata. And I do indeed have a roundup for you. We're going to talk about this week's podcast episode. We are going to talk about some interesting comments in our media about Strata. We're going to talk about what I've been working on this week for a couple of clients, where I've been this week, and what I'm looking forward to over the next week. So lots to talk about here today on Friday Live. There are a number of you coming on in already, watching live. Great to see you here today. If you want to drop me a hello here in the comments, I'd love to know that you're there and that you're watching. Thank you for being here live. If you're catching the replay, then definitely drop in those comments and give me a hello here on the replay. I would love to see you and know that you are tuning in. Have you managed to catch this week's podcast episode yet? We released that one yesterday. My chat with Rena Van Alst, episode number 357. It was. Yes, indeed. Those numbers are stacking up. Going to have to start planning the preparations for episode number 399. No, the word that I meant to say was episode number 400. 400 will be here before we know it. Rena and I were talking about whether bylaws that force owners to receive their meeting agendas by email are legal. Are those bylaws legal? Can we try and save some money, save some energy for our strata managers, for our owners corporations? Can we try and prevent the issue of hard copy meeting notices by having a bylaw that says you must have an electronic address for service and you must accept service of your agendas by email? I had a view on that. Rena had a view on that. We shared that in this week's podcast episode. I'm going to come back around to that issue because there is an interesting comment on the website from a podcast listener who has given me some more food for thought. So I'm going to come around to that one. I am heading over to this chat because many of you are coming in live and saying hello, and I want to acknowledge you. Coming in as Dom. Hey, how you doing? Dom from NetStrata. Great to see you, Dom. Welcome. Hope you are doing well. Coming in through Facebook. Awesome. Hope all is well with you too. John is here saying hi. Hey, John. How you going? Good to have you with us. Are you in fine form? In fine form today, John? I would I welcome, this is a bit scary. I welcome your comments, John. Bring them on. Shana is here saying, hi, Amanda. Great to see you. Lovely to have you with us, Shana. Thank you for joining. Carolina is here saying, hi there. Carolina coming to us from LinkedIn. Awesome. Great to see you, Carolina. We have the link here for the week's podcast episode, number 357 with Rena. I'm going to come back to that one. Anna is here saying, hi, how are you? I am doing great. Thank you, Anna. How are you? Javier is here saying, hi, Amanda. Good to see you, Javier. All righty, more of you coming on in live as we get warmed up here for our Friday live session. Great to have you here. If you're here and haven't yet said hello, please do feel free to give me a hello here in the comments, as well as talking about bylaws that force owners to receive their meeting agendas by email. In this week's podcast episode, Rena and I talked about the electronic signing of proxy forms. I know that was a hot topic. Some comments on that issue over on LinkedIn and here on Facebook underneath the podcast post. I know many of you strata managers are seeing more of this, attempts to electronically sign proxy forms. Definitely have a listen to this week's episode if that's something that you're grappling with. Rena shared her win for the week, which was her skillful handling of some decision making where she's acting as the compulsory manager for a building that needs a significant amount of remedial work. And Rena talked about how, even though she's the compulsory manager and she has all power to make decisions on behalf of this owners corporation, she is making a point of involving those owners in the discussions with the contractors, of getting their views on exactly how much work needs to be done, should be done, whether additional upgrade and improvement work should be done at the same time. And then she's making her decision in her capacity as compulsory manager with that background information and getting some really great feedback from owners there that she is serving them well. And that is how a compulsory manager gets appointed at the end of their compulsory management as a voluntary manager. These are just words that we're making up, by the way. The legislation does not call our strata managers voluntary managers, but a strata manager who is appointed by the owners corporation as opposed to being appointed by the tribunal. So I know that happens regularly in the buildings that Rena is appointed to manage as a compulsory manager. She does that well. And when the management is up, that community decides to keep her on, which is a nice way to end up. Just seeing a comment coming through here from Leonie. Hey, Leonie, how are you? Saying great to hear that she's involving the owners. Yep, I think that's a good thing as well. Okay. We also talked about the win that I shared in this week's podcast episode was about a 2-lot strata scheme where I had been acting for a minority owner. So in my experience, an unusual setup where one of the lots had 65% of the unit entitlement and the other lot had 35%. And this was a situation where the majority lot owner did not want to spend upwards of $100,000 on remedial work that needed to be done to my client's lot, the common property impacting my client's lot. My client had a win in that respect, and head on over and have a listen to the podcast to hear about that one. If you're managing 2-lot schemes, if you are living in 2-lot strata schemes, then really important one to have a listen to. And we've talked about 2-lot strata plans a few times on the podcast. This just reminds me, we have on our podcasts page on the website a newly implemented, this is a bit dangerous because I haven't checked this yet, but I know it's there, newly implemented search function on the podcast page. So I will just surprise Rochelle and Mina with this. If you can just pop into the comments here, the direct link to our podcast page, which is yourstrataproperty.com.au/podcasts. That will take you to all of our 357 podcast episodes there on the website. And we have a new search function that I believe is working really well at the moment. We've always had a search function. It's been a little bit sticky sometimes. We've recently upgraded the website and that search function is working really well now. If you search 2-lot strata plans, then you should find you should find a few relevant podcast episodes. Same goes for any topic that you'd like to learn more about through listening to the podcast episode. Use that search function there on the page. And if you want to get the podcast delivered directly to your inbox every week, then you want to sign up to our mailing list. And you can do that there at yourstrataproperty.com.au as well. If you're a member, you are definitely getting those podcasts and the transcript to your inbox every week. They go out to our members directly. If you're not a member, but you still want to grab just that podcast episode, then make sure you're on our mailing list through the website, yourstrataproperty.com.au. Those links to the podcast page coming through in the comments there. Just heading back over, if you're coming in and you haven't yet said hi, feel free to give me a hello. Anna is saying here, can we insist on having paper documents again? And on that, not having AGMs via Zoom and going back to in-person meetings. Great questions, Anna. As for receiving documents by paper, if your address for service that you've notified to the Secretary of the Owners Corporation, which may be your strata manager if you have one, if your address for service is a postal address, then that is what needs to happen. Hard copies of agendas need to be mailed to you, and you will have them in your mailbox. If you haven't had a listen to the podcast chat, episode 357, Rena and I definitely talk about that, and I step through the relevant parts of the legislation that make that a requirement. As for not having AGMs via Zoom and going back to in-person meetings, such a topical question. You'll hear me chat later on today about a meeting that I attended on Wednesday evening, attended in person at AGM for a client, and this exact question came up. If we agree to have meetings online, if we agree to have pre-meeting electronic voting, does that mean that we can never again have meetings in person? And if some owners want to have meetings in person and some want to have meetings online, how does that work? Legally, the position is that it's up to the secretary to determine how they convene meetings of the Owners Corporation and whether that's going to be a meeting online, but still with real-time voting. You're voting through a poll feature or in the chat in a Zoom meeting, or whether you're going to have meetings in person, or whether you're going to have meetings wholly by pre-meeting electronic voting. So everybody votes via a voting platform prior to the meeting even taking place. So everything's determined without there being any discussion. That is a decision that the secretary makes. They're the ones who have the function of putting together the agenda for the meeting. I say the secretary, but in practice, it's really the Strata committee who's making this decision about when to convene general meetings, how they should be convened, and then giving that instruction to their Strata manager. So much to the frustration of many owners, unless you are that secretary or you have a loud voice on the Strata committee, you actually don't have any control over how these meetings are conducted, whether they're in person, whether they're online, whether they're solely by pre-meeting electronic voting. I do think that's a problem. I do think it is possible, and I'm seeing this in some communities, and I'm hearing from some owners that this is happening. It's possible that this means buildings might only ever have meetings online and may never have meetings in person. That might not be a good thing for a lot of communities, and it might isolate certain owners. It might mean that there isn't the opportunity for that healthy, vigorous debate and discussion about controversial issues. I suppose, on the other hand, electronic meetings can give the opportunity for owners who are away, who are interstate or who are overseas, to attend their meetings as well. So maybe it works both ways. I think in good functioning communities, there'll be a good balance. But I do see, Anna, that in some communities, that's not the case. Thank you for asking that question. It leads me to a deeper discussion about the service of agendas and the electronic service of agendas, which Rena and I were talking about on the podcast. Anna's just asked about there. There is a comment over on the website under this week's podcast episode from Stephen. It's a public comment there under the episode. You can go and check it out. And Stephen has copied and pasted the terms of what's called a recovery of stationary expenses bylaw. Now, that's stationery with an E. So we Australians know that that's all about paper, the expenses of paper and administrative expenses that may be incurred where an owner's corporation through its strata manager has to send out hundreds of thousands of pages of documents related to an annual general meeting or a general meeting where not everybody has their address for service as an email address. Some are getting it by post. And Stephen has set out under the podcast episode a bylaw that apparently is drafted by a well-known, Stephen refers to it as a well-known strata brief. I don't know if that means a well-known strata lawyer has drafted this bylaw, not one of mine. And I think he's asking me, what do you think about stationary cost bylaws? What the bylaw does is permit the owner's corporation to recover from a lot owner who has not provided an email address for service of notices, permits the owner's corporation to recover an administrative fee to reimburse the owner's corporation the costs of serving documents by post or by other non-electronic means, the bylaw says. And Stephen's saying, what do you think about this bylaw? Is it valid given that it is a function of the owner's corporation under the Act to serve owners at their address for service? And as you will hear Rena and I talk about on the podcast this week, it is up to owners to decide how they're served to provide their address for service of notice. It is legal to provide a postal address only as an address for service. So what do we think of a bylaw that then requires owners to provide an email address for service? And if they don't, the bylaw says we're going to charge you an administrative fee for our costs of having to serve you by post. Very interesting. If you want to go over and check out the terms of that bylaw, it's sitting there under this week's podcast episode. I think Bill and Ben is outing himself here. I'm going to bring up your comment here, Bill and Ben. You're saying Bannerman's or Grace are the names I was given for that stationary bylaw. Okay, so they're the well-known strata lawyers who may have drafted this bylaw. Thank you, Bill and Ben. Look, I agree with the comment that was made under the podcast episode that it is a function of an owner's corporation to serve meeting notices at the address for service. And our legislation says that an owner can provide an Australian postal address as the address for service. So a bylaw that tries to get around that or tries to penalize owners for not providing an email address for service, I can see how very carefully the bylaw has been drafted to not frame that fee as a penalty, which is important. It's a good question. It's a good question. I'd be interested to know how many buildings might have that bylaw in place and what owners might think about it. Many more of you coming in and saying hello. It is so good to see you all excited for this afternoon's Friday Live. Kristen, very kindly, is saying, ooh, I like the new search function. Yeah, awesome. So do I, Kristen. That's our new search function. At the moment, it's on the podcast page on the website. I believe it's going to go right through the member portal as well, and no doubt in other parts of the website, which is great. Katrina's saying, hey, hun to you too, Katrina. Good to see you. Ordinary Person is here. Nice to see you, Ordinary Person. Hope you had a good Easter too, Katrina. Bill and Ben saying big hello to you. You're welcome, Anna. Anna saying we don't have a secretary, just committee members. Oh, that's a whole other topic we can go off on here, Anna. I think I was asked this recently in the member forum about the nomination of committee members. And I'll go back and check, but I'm pretty sure when I looked up the legislation, my findings were that a strata committee must elect office bearers at its first meeting after it has been appointed. One of you is going to tell me whether that's right or not. You're going to go and check that out. So interesting that you don't have a secretary. If you have a strata manager, perhaps they have taken on delegated authority to carry out those secretarial functions. Daryl's here saying, hello, strata friends. Hello to you, friend Daryl. Good afternoon, Sean O'Day. Lovely to have you with us. Daryl saying it would take 10 years for the bylaw recovery to pay off the costs of installing it. Yeah, perhaps. You may have gone and read the terms of that bylaw, I think, Daryl, because I think it does say it defines what the fee is. The administrative fee is an amount of $20 per quarter or other such amounts that may be determined by the owner's corporation from time to time, acting reasonably, and it's commensurate with the administrative costs charged to the owner's corporation. So what's that, $80 a year? How much is it costing you? Owners corporation, strata managers managing large owners corporations for sending out these big agendas. Is it more than $80 a year? A lot. How long's a piece of string? Probably depends on how big your buildings are and how controversial your agendas are. But interesting one. Thank you, Stephen, for sharing that one under our podcast episode. Carolina is asking, can legal and surveyor's costs be recovered? That relates to individual lot owner property. It also overlaps a little into common area. Hard to say, Carolina. Generally speaking, an owner's corporation is only going to be responsible for costs that relate to common property, not to lot property. But it depends why we're getting these legal and surveyor's fees being charged that relate to lot property, whether there's some obligation of the owner's corporation that has to be met or hasn't been met that then impacts lot property. Maybe there could be the ability to charge or recover legal and surveyor's costs. That's a tricky one. Hello, Cheryl McLean. Nice to see you. Welcome, welcome. Sean saying it is a cost recovery. That might be in reply to another comment there, Sean. Good to see you here, Sean. Okay, lots of comments coming in. You guys are excited. You are on fire. I'm seeing a correct there from Daryl. Okay. Anna's saying, I'm sitting here laughing. Every time I listen to you, I find more and more things that our OC is doing incorrectly. I am so glad that that makes you laugh, Anna, because there's two ways that could go. Laughing is a good option. Good on you. Happy to make you laugh on a Friday afternoon. Section 41. Thank you, Daryl. I knew someone would do it. I was thinking you. Someone would do it. Section 41, Strata Schemes Management Act, office bearers must be appointed. There you go, Anna. You've now got a section as well. Henry, nice to see you, Henry. Welcome, welcome. Henry saying, I would be sending a stamped, self-addressed envelope to the Strata manager, the Burke's backyard of Strata. Younger generations may not know what that means, Henry. Not sure that we have too many younger generations tuning in here. Yes, that's one way to reduce costs. That's for sure. I'd love to know if there's a building asking for that, or if there's a bylaw, I should say, asking for that. Tracy is giving us some helpful information. Standard agenda with attachments, but without additional motions, with a standard post costs approximately $11 per address. Okay, so the bylaw that Stephen has alerted us to, which apparently permits an owner's corporation to recover $20 per quarter per owner who receives their material by post, probably about covers it, depending on how many general meetings you're having, of course. This assumes that we might be having a general meeting every quarter, which for some communities may not be the case. Okay, great discussion. We are so warm, so happy, warm and happy. The feelings that we have here on Friday Live, you're all warmed up. You're warmed up is what I'm trying to say. You've enjoyed this week's podcast episode. What about the media? Look, there's been lots going on in the media about Strata. I've had friends texting me today about, Amanda, did you see this particular story? Some updates coming out of the Aurora building in Melbourne. We've been hearing about lots, as usual. It's never quiet in Strata. But the one that I've picked out today to share with you is about window safety devices. I'm sharing my screen with you now. Unfortunately, when we look at these free websites, you get all the advertising as well. If anyone needs a better deal on their home loan, there you go. News.com.au, a little over last week, I think that was, last week, April 7, and this appeared on a few different websites. Nanny State, Aussies complain about an annoying detail in modern apartments. What's the annoying feature? I think this is a video that hasn't played, but the annoying feature is this. The window safety devices that restrict the way that restrict the extent to which windows can open. So we know in Strataland this term as a window safety device because that's the term used in our New South Wales legislation. So this story, we do have a link to the Daily Mail article, which is not the one I'm showing you here. This one had less ads on it than the Daily Mail. Sydney resident has sparked online debate after questioning why most modern houses and apartments come with this annoying feature. This is a photo of their bedroom featuring two typical chain winder awning windows with narrow openings. Why are most modern houses and apartments built with these windows that inhibit fresh air circulation? Well, what the conclusion is here in this article is that it's the law. The simple answer is it's the law. And I read this article with some interest because I thought, I wonder if they've picked up that in New South Wales, this is actually the Strata law. The article tells us that under the National Construction Code, I didn't know this, so some of you might let me know if you knew this, but under the National Construction Code, bedroom windows with a fall height of 2 meters or more must have restricted openings of no more than 12.5 centimeters. And I understand that to be that they are capable of being restricted to no more than 12.5 centimeters. So apparently that's in the National Construction Code. This is right across the country now. It was updated in 2013 to include the new requirement, and ding, 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 the article does, surprisingly, mention our Strata Schemes Management Act 2015. New South Wales owners corporations can be fined up to $550 for non-compliance with the standard, and owners can also be fined. These laws also introduced 2013, our Strata legislation, and I'll show you where this is. This didn't start until 2018 in New South Wales, so I'm not quite sure what that 2013, whether that's relevant to the National Construction Code. But indeed, the 2 years prior to that, 39 children aged 9 or younger were hospitalised in New South Wales due to window falls, and that's why we have this requirement. So this requirement is now in Section 118 of our New South Wales Strata Schemes Management Act, which I shall share with you when my computer catches up. That's not the section. That's a different section, which we will be talking about very soon. I will share with you Section 118 when I have a good guess at which one it is. My screen is a little small today. We'll get there. This one is the correct one. Here it is. This media article jumped out to me because exactly this issue came up at an AGM that I attended on Wednesday night. Okay, so this legislation has been in place in New South Wales since 2018. I remember very clearly when it came in and we all got a little bit panicked, and what does it mean and how is it going to work? Some of us are still a little bit panicked, a little bit unsure about what this means and how it works. This came up at the meeting I attended on Wednesday night, and it caused me to go and have a look at this section and to refresh on exactly what it says. It says that an owner's corporation must ensure that there are complying window safety devices for all windows of each building in the strata scheme that are windows to which this section applies. And it turns out that if you read it further, it's about residential owners corporations, not commercial. And it's about windows of a certain height from the ground. I actually think it's a bit different to the 2 meters. Was that 2 meters we saw in the NCC, the National Construction Code? I think it might be a bit less than that. But we must have window safety devices fitted to these windows. And the owner's corporation, have a close look here, is responsible for ensuring that there are complying window safety devices. The owner's corporation is to carry out work under this section at its own expense and may carry out work on any part of the parcel. So it may go into lots in order to carry out this work. Now, the question that came up in the meeting I was at on Wednesday was, well, if we've done this once, if we're an owner's corporation that did this back in 2018, back in 2019, what is our ongoing obligation to make sure that these devices are still in place? Whether they can be something very tiny, like I've got in my windows I've got a level 7 apartment, and we definitely have window safety devices there, and it's just a little key lock that restricts how far the sliding window can operate. Sometimes it might be those chain winder restrictions that we saw in the article. Some are operated by Allen keys, some are operated by actual lock keys, But the idea is that they can be locked in place, and they also can be opened, so that if you do choose, you don't have children or you're not concerned, and you are a resident in the building, you can choose to open up that window and keep it open further than 12.5 centimeters. So what I think in this building where I was attending the AGM on Wednesday, because some years have passed, many tenants moving in and out, some owners are concerned that the window safety devices have been removed by tenants and they're not sure whether they're still in place. And if they're not in place, the question is, whose responsibility is it to install and ensure that these devices are in place? Is it the owner's corporation's responsibility, or is it the owner? Now, on my reading of section 118, that says that the owner's corporation must ensure that there are complying window safety devices for all windows to which the section applies, so windows of a certain height. There's no time limit on that section. There's no, it must do it once and then it doesn't have to do it again. It is an ongoing obligation to ensure that these devices are in place. I know some buildings, when this legislation first started, put in place bylaws that shifted that responsibility over to lot owners. It would be important to have a close look at the terms of those bylaws to work out whether they are valid or not, question whether there was consent from lot owners to take on that responsibility. And some buildings have put in place regimes, annual regimes for checking, having inspections done, checking that these devices are still in place. And if they're not, accepting their responsibility as an owner's corporation to go and put these devices in place. Now, something that was being debated at the meeting that I attended on Wednesday was whether a building could have what is essentially an opt-out process for these window safety devices. It might every year send a letter around to all owners and ask those owners if they have window safety devices in place. If they do, they may confirm that they do, and they don't need anybody to come in and check them and don't need anybody to come in and replace them. And if they don't have them, so in that way, they're opting out of a project that the owner's corporation might have to assess and to deal with these devices. And if otherwise, if they don't notify the owner's corporation that they've got them in place and they don't need anybody to come in, then the owner's corporation will send a contractor around to check all of the relevant windows and make sure that those devices are there. And in that way, complying with its duty under section 118, and to the extent they are not attending to certain lots, that's because they have been expressly told in writing by the owner that the owner does not want or does not need them to. So one way to deal with it, every building will be different, and I'm interested to hear from any strata managers who are here how your client builders are dealing with this. I think 5 years after this legislation has come into effect, which is where we're at now, we're going to start seeing this question come up more and more. Lots of compliance when we first started out with the legislation, and now, because of the passage of time, window safety devices coming off windows and people being concerned about these obligations. Heading back on up to the comments here, Rochelle Amina just checking that the link to section 108 is correct there. Thank you, Anna. Katrina is saying, is a window safety form sufficient for an owner's corporation to complete and return to the managing agent? This is the question, Katrina. What does that form say? How is it completed? Is this a form that goes around to every owner and you sort of tick a box to say you've got them or you haven't got them? Good question. Is there a bylaw that sets out that this is the process that has been agreed by the owners to take on that responsibility for informing the owner's corporation of the state of their window safety devices? Daryl's saying, is this retrospective for older buildings that were code compliant at the time of the build? So the Strata legislation is retrospective, Daryl. So when that first came in, it didn't matter when your building was built. It didn't matter. It didn't matter when the building was built. This was a blanket requirement. If you're a residential strata scheme, windows of a certain height from the ground, owner's corporation must ensure that there are complying window safety devices installed. NCC, you're probably right. On the NCC side of things, probably not, what would I know? Strata lawyer, not a construction lawyer. I would think probably not required for older buildings, a new code moving forward for new buildings. And that's why we may be seeing these news stories now that look like a pretty new looking window that I saw there in that article. These windows are being designed, constructed as complying window safety, with complying window safety devices perhaps being restricted in place, and tenants don't have the option of opening them even wider if they want to get some airflow. Of course, we combine that with leaky buildings, got water penetration, we've got mold. People are wanting to open up their windows wider to be able to get some ventilation. So you can see this sort of perfect storm of events here. So I would think NCC, not retrospective, but definitely Section 108 applies to all residential strata buildings, regardless of construction. Thank you, Anna, for posting that working link. Kristen saying, so is a bylaw to be passed to move responsibility for window safety devices to individual lot owners likely to be valid? Depends what it says. I have drafted such bylaws in the past, many years ago now, feels like many years ago now, when this legislation first started. And I think it does have to be very carefully drafted, depending on what is the responsibility that you're shifting. Is it a responsibility to notify the owner's corporation? Is it a responsibility to to take on the obligation to install the safety devices? I don't think it would be helpful for me to opine any further on that, Kristen. It really depends on the terms of the bylaw. Henry saying there is another regulation that states all blind control chains are to be half the length of the windows and attached to the wall. Okay, interesting. I don't know if that, I know, Henry, you're in Victoria. I don't know if that's in your strata legislation or if that's an NCC thing. Oh, you're talking about actual blind. Yeah, the cords on blinds. I'm looking at one at my window right now. Half the length of the windows attached to the wall. And that's blinds are a fitting, not a fixture, or a fitting that owners, residents might put in place. So that's interesting. I'd like to know where that regulation is. So, Kristen, I can see you asking me some detailed questions there. I would suggest that you might want to get some legal advice on the actual terms of your bylaw. Leonie's saying, so Amanda, does this have to be checked more than once? We have them and we're previously checked by the strata manager. Previously checked, the strata manager wants them checked again. Yeah, so look, I think yes. My interpretation of Section 108 is that this is an ongoing obligation to ensure that there are compliant safety devices on all windows. So this is exactly the discussion that came up at this meeting I was at on Wednesday. And it was, there was a motion on the agenda. And I think for this strata management company, this was a standard motion that they put on every agenda, that these devices be checked, and that a contractor go around and check windows and make sure that they're in place. And if they're in place, that they're working. And if they're not in place, that they be installed. And it was the advice of this strata manager that this be done. And there were people in the room who were saying, look, I know I don't have them and I would like them. So we think this is a good idea to do this. At the end of the day, again, nanny state or no nanny state, this is a safety issue. I don't think anybody wants to be in a building where a child or a small person or an animal is injured because they've fallen out of a window, when the solution to that is a pretty easy, pretty cheap one. Sean saying, we have a motion to consider if an audit of the devices is required to be approved by the owners at the AGM. So there you go. Wasn't Sean's strata management company on Wednesday, it was a different one, but clearly many strata managers out there are recommending this. Henry's saying, could apartments be prevented from being sold if these safety devices are not present? Not in New South Wales, Henry. We don't have that legislation, so it's different to swimming pools. I don't know if you might be thinking about the swimming pools legislation. At least in New South Wales, if there is a swimming pool on the property, whether it's a freestanding home or a strata building, your contract for sale has to include a compliance certificate for the swimming pool. I think that's still the law. It was the law a few years ago. Not the case, as far as I'm aware, for window safety devices. So there's no certificate that gets issued. There's no sort of independent council representative that comes around and checks. So no, it wouldn't prevent your apartment from being sold. Okay, there is lots of discussion in the chat here about this topic. I may need to come back around to that because we've got more to talk about today. Uh, I can't go past Colin Campbell and your comment. Thank you, Colin. What amazes me in this discussion is whoever cares about the 39 kids that fell out windows, owners dodging their responsibilities until their kids or grandkids fall out. Yeah. So thank you, Colin, for raising that. That is a good summary of my feelings that I expressed earlier as well. This is all about safety at the end of the day, and these are not expensive devices to put in place. Okay, I can't keep up with that chat. I will come back around and have a look at those. But yeah, timely because it came up at the meeting that I attended on Wednesday night. The other thing that happened at that meeting, which I do want to share with you, I won't reveal too much detail to protect the identity of my client, but ultimately, I was there to help support the passage of a special resolution which my client had been proposing and had been attempting to get passed for some time, relevant to some major renovation work that my client was doing at their lot. And I'm often asked to give advice and provide representation to owners in that position where they're having a great deal of difficulty, for whatever reason, getting approval for their renovations. And there's a few things that I suggest to owners in that position. And this client took my advice and put in place, took the steps that I was suggesting and had a win on Wednesday night. Finally got that special resolution through. The renovation has been approved, but it was so close. It was so close. I think it was about 24% of the unit entitlement voted against this proposal. And if you know your New South Wales strata law, if more than 25% vote against, then a special resolution will not pass. So this was a very, very close vote. But one of the things that my client did do that I had recommended was to campaign to other owners in the building to encourage them to vote in favor of the motion. How was the campaign done? Well, first of all, if you're going to campaign, you need to know who to contact. And you want to be contacting owners in the building because they're the ones who hold the vote. And in some buildings, there's a majority tenants living in the property. So you can't really go around and just door knock your way through and have cups of teas and glasses of wine and have a chat and deliver bouquets of flowers and kiss babies and whatever else you might do when you're campaigning. You need to get the contact details of the owners so that you can communicate with them. How do you do that? You get your hands on the strata roll. Now, some of you here in the chat, as many owners do, may say, Amanda, can't get it. I've tried to get it. I've asked my strata manager for the strata roll. I'm told that I'm not allowed to have it. I'm not allowed to have the contact details of owners. I've said many times, I've said it on the podcast. I was going to say I should record myself and replay that. I've recorded myself many times saying this. You are, as an owner, entitled to a copy of the strata roll, a complete copy of the strata roll, including the contact details that are on there for owners, including if that's an email address. You are entitled to email addresses. You are entitled to phone numbers, the full copy of the strata roll. So with my guidance, my client obtained a full copy of the strata roll, had a strata manager who knew the law and understood that this strata roll needed to be provided to the owner. And my client set about wrote a campaign letter that was then circulated to all owners by email. And I believe there were conversations that happened on site with those owners who were actually living on site and explained what the renovation was all about, what the owner had done to make sure that all of the interests of the owners corporation were protected. And my client said, hey, I'm here, happy to answer questions. If you have questions about this project, please do come and see me. The key points to note when you are writing a campaign letter. I've already raised one, get access to the strata roll so you know where to send that campaign letter. Strategic move, don't send the letter out until the agenda has been issued, because otherwise you're communicating to owners in a bit of a vacuum. You might send out the letter saying, hey, I want to do this renovation. It's going to be coming up at a meeting at some point in the future. I'm not really sure when that is. May or may not have a copy of the bylaw ready. don't really know what it is I want you to do right now, but hey, I'm here. That kind of letter is not going to get a lot of attention and a lot of headspace in an owner's mind and in their inbox. When the agenda has been issued, you will hopefully have at least a week to be able to communicate with owners and say, have you got your agenda? You may have noticed that motion 25 on the agenda is a proposal for renovation work at lot 42. My name is Amanda. I am the owner of lot 42, and I just wanted to explain to you what that's all about and to encourage you to attend the meeting and have your say. You may not be saying in your campaign letter, attend the meeting and vote in favor of my motion. All you're asking for is that attention be given to the issue, that if there's questions or concerns about the motion, that they're raised with you, the owner, before the meeting, and that this owner makes the time to attend the meeting, to listen to the discussion and the debate, and to vote. My client did that, and what happened at this meeting on Wednesday night was they had a record turnout. My client wasn't sure how many of those owners were going to be voting in favor of the renovation work that was being proposed, but those owners were certainly there to hear the discussion, to hear what was said in favor of the motion and against the motion, and to have their say. And a lot of that, if not all of that, went down to the campaign letter and the campaigning that my client did ahead of that AGM. So it can be hard work, and sometimes I talk to owners that want to do renovation work and understand they need to get the special resolution passed, but they say, oh, Amanda, I don't live in the property and that's going to be really hard, and I don't really know anyone, and I don't really feel comfortable sending out emails. If you want to get your work approved, then at the end of the day, this is the democratic process. And it's not a legal issue per se. It is more a practical issue, this question of campaigning. But I just see owners who put the effort in, who understand the power of a good campaign, are the ones who are successful at the end of the day. And that's definitely what we saw on Wednesday evening. Your campaign letters, try and keep it short, to the point as much as you can. I like to say no more than 2 pages. Sometimes that's hard. People are busy. They don't want to be reading pages and pages of documents in addition to the agenda. And be very clear about the action that you want them to take. Maybe it is, well, as I've said, it should be attend the meeting and vote. If you know that they're away, they're overseas, they're interstate, they're not able to attend the meeting, it's suggesting to them that they might like to appoint a proxy who can attend the meeting in their place and cast their vote the way they want to cast that vote. In some buildings, owners can hold more than one proxy, depending on how big your building is. In other buildings, it's not possible to hold more than one proxy. So you may want to, as an owner, have a contingency plan that if your neighbor writes back to you and says, I can't attend, but I'd really like you to hold my proxy, then you may want to have a couple of friends or family members lined up to be able to attend holding proxies if you know that that vote is going to be important to get across the line. So that's the power of campaign letters. If you are a strata manager, be aware that you are dealing with more educated, aware owners these days. Sorry about that. And they may be contacting you to get copies of the strata roll ahead of general meetings in order to do this kind of campaigning. Section 182 of our Strata Schemes Management Act means that owners can make an appointment to inspect the records of the owners corporation. Those records must include the strata roll. And that's why I say that owners have a right to get copies of the strata roll. Whether the owners corporation makes them go through that process of making an appointment and inspecting the records and taking a copy, or whether the owner's corporation is happy to simply produce a copy of the strata roll, which is what the owner wants. I leave that up to you, but don't be surprised, strata managers, if you're getting more of those requests. And if you're an owner wanting to do this kind of work, then you've invested a lot of time, probably a lot of money in getting this together. It means a lot to you. It adds value to your property, adds value to the building. I'm comfortable in saying for most renovations adds value to the building, and it's worth putting the effort in to get this done. Okay, I think we may still be talking about window safety devices here in the chat. I'm going to head back over to there to see if there's any comments here. Daryl saying, what do you mean by no consent? You don't need consent to raise a motion. That may also include a bylaw. Not sure what that is, Daryl. That may be in response to somebody else who is commenting still on Windows safety devices. Let me know if you need me to address anything new that's coming up in there. Okay. Discussion going on in our member forum this week. I was in there just last night, and I thought this was a neat one to pull out and bring to you here on Friday Live. I received the question from a member, Amanda, someone in my building has taken the owner's corporation to NCAT because of a waterproofing issue. That person won. Now the owner's corporation is doing the repairs that they've been ordered to do. The member said to me, Amanda, I only know about this because the reference to the case is in the committee meeting minutes. There's no other detail. And there's no other detail. I don't have a copy of the NCAT judgment. Is there an obligation for the owner's corporation or the committee or the strata manager to send me a copy of the NCAT judgment, or how else might I get that judgment? Really great question. And it was clear to me in reading this that this particular member was not aware of a provision in our New South Wales legislation that requires owners' corporations to serve copies of tribunal orders on owners. So it occurred to me that you may not know this either. I am going to share with you here section number 243 of our Strata Schemes Management Act. This is the section that tells us that an owner's corporation, if it receives an order under this act from the tribunal, the owner's corporation must display the copy of the order in a prominent position on the notice board within 3 days after receiving it. That's not very long. And leave it there for 14 days. Or if the owner's corporation doesn't have a notice board, it has to cause a copy of the order to be given to each person whose name appears on the strata roll. So the way that you would generally do that is to send a copy of the order to the address for service of notices that's appearing on the strata roll. Now, not only did the member in my community not know about this section, I find that I come across many strata managers and strata committees that do not know about this section. So as many of you will know, most of my work these days is for lot owners. So I'm acting in tribunal proceedings for lot owners, and often the case that where that owner is successful, they want everyone to know about it. They want everyone to know that the legal fees that their owner's corporation has been paying, what they've been going to, that they were vindicated in their tribunal application. And the owners that I work with, because they asked me the question, they are aware of this section of the legislation, and they get quite frustrated when their strata manager doesn't seem to be aware of it or doesn't seem to pass this on to the committee to say, hey, you need to put a copy of the tribunal orders on the notice board, or we need to send them to every owner at their address for service. And we need to do that within 3 days of receiving the order. So an important one to be aware of there, it's kind of tucked away there in the Act, section 243. We've got a link to that section here in the chat for you. Denise is here saying, hi. Hey, Denise. Nice to hear you. Nice to hear you. Nice to see you. Can't hear you. I can't hear anyone. I can't see anyone. Actually, can't hear. I can see your names and I can see your comments. Don't freak out. Good to see you, Denise. Sean is here saying, I think the orders from NCAT also state this on them when sent out. Great. That's good. And you're reading them, Sean, and you're complying with section 243 of the Act. Not everybody is doing that. And 3 days is not a long time. Sean O'Day is saying, is that for orders only? What about notices of directions hearings, for instance? Yeah, it's for orders. It's for orders only, Sean. So expressly said, section 243 expressly says copies of orders is the title to that section, and must cause a copy of the order to be given. You've said they're notices of directions hearings. So notices of directions hearings are not orders, but directions of the tribunal are orders. So after a directions hearing, there will be a timetable set for the preparation of the case for hearing. So within 4 weeks, the applicant has to file their material. 4 weeks after that, the respondent has to file their material. Those are orders. And I can't see anything in this section 243 that differentiates those types of procedural orders from final orders. So let me come back to that. But I'm thinking that you may need to be issuing your procedural orders as well. Does anyone have a thought on that? Sean B, Daryl, anyone have a thought on that? Circulating your procedural orders? They are orders. I would say this section was intended only to deal with final orders. Maybe or maybe not. If you've got procedural orders, then others may want to be aware of them and to understand that they have the opportunity to weigh in if it's a matter that concerns more than one owner. Okay, I'm just heading back here. Anna's saying, is that the same when the OC takes a lot owner to NCAT? Yeah, absolutely. So it doesn't matter who won. Doesn't matter who won the case. It doesn't matter who the applicant was. If it's an order of the tribunal, then it needs to be circulated. Daryl's saying, I don't have one on hand, but I think a notice of hearing says it must be furnished to all owners. Yeah, I mean, that might be a procedural suggestion on the part of the tribunal, but oh God, you're going to tell me that I'm wrong, but I don't know. I don't know that a notice of hearing is an order. The order setting the matter down for hearing, which may be set out in the directions that are made, which I was talking about earlier, that might be the order to be serving, but not the actual notice of hearing itself. So I'd be interested to see one of those, Daryl, if you wanted to post that. I guess in the appropriate place, I'm going to say. From LinkedIn, I'm just going to say, this is a company name, obviously, Baumeister Proprietary Limited. All good, thanks. Yet what are the conditions if the strata management refuse to follow the orders? Well, depends what the orders themselves were. But if the strata manager is saying, I'm not going to circulate the order, I'm not going to put it on the notice board, or I'm not going to send it to all owners, then the secretary of the owners corporation, the person who is elected, the secretary, sits on the committee, should be taking up that responsibility and making sure that happens. And also taking issue with their strata manager for not exercising their delegated authority if they have it and not acting in accordance with instructions. This comes up a little bit. Sometimes I hear, Amanda, my strata manager won't, or my strata manager says no, or they're uncontactable, or just because you have a strata manager doesn't mean you have no power. And you can't, as committee members, as secretary, treasurer, chair, exercise your functions yourself in the absence of your strata manager, or in the absence of your strata manager exercising those functions. You still have those functions even if your contract with your strata manager has delegated them. So it's important to remember that. That can be empowering to know. Kristen's saying it's definitely interesting. I think so too, Kristen, that is all that I have for you this week. I've done lots of talking. You've done lots of listening. I am very grateful for that. There were lots of you here live today. It's been wonderful to see you. We looked at lots of legislation, some current issues in Strata. If you have found that to be helpful, if you believe that your friends, colleagues, neighbors, clients will benefit from this kind of information, then please do. Give me a thumbs up here on Facebook. Give me a love heart. Press the share button if you've got a group or friends that you want to share this with. Go ahead. That's how we get all of those great Facebook juices in particular flowing and making sure that this important strata information can reach as many people as possible. So very grateful for you taking the time on a Friday afternoon to be here. Hope you've got a lovely weekend planned. I am about to dive into some more travel. I've only been back for 24 hours, less than 24 hours here in my country home, but I'm heading back to Sydney tomorrow with family in tow this time, which is great. We're going to be driving to Sydney tomorrow and then spending the second week of the school holidays there. So I will be in town, working from town. And tomorrow is our first time taking one car to the city. It's about a 3.5, 4-hour drive. Taking one car with one child and 2 dogs and all the luggage. So in the past, we have, because of our different schedules, taken 2 cars. First time, 1 car, all luggage, all family members. Wish me luck. And Barnaby, who's the youngest dog, He's a vomiter. So lucky you're not me. We'll work it out. We will have a lovely weekend. I hope you do as well. And yeah, be here next Friday. Be coming to you from the Sydney pad next Friday. I will look forward to seeing you, not hearing you, seeing you, not seeing you, seeing your comments and your names here next Friday. Enjoy. Bye bye.